starting to identify, okay, they're key things that the very best in the world do and have all done. And when I say very best, just looking at sort of blanketly every player who's averaged over 50. And I've identified some key fundamentals, which are then the building blocks of, I hate the word technical, because my message is that, focusing all your time and energy on technique is the biggest mistake you're making. It's the reason you're stuck, frustrated, and you're not improving your performance. And your fundamentals inform your technique. So once you understand what these key fundamentals are, how to train them, and then most importantly, how to measure them so you know if you're doing them correctly, your measurables act as a feedback loop that prevent any bad habits from creeping into your game.
Cricket Life Stories with me, Neel Khagram. Again on the channel, got Gio Colussi, elite batting coach. Gio, how's it all going?
Yeah, brilliant. As said you a second ago, some beautiful weather in Cape Town, but autumn creaking in. So looking forward to some quiet, slow time. Essentially, what I do is I'm combining two roles as I see it. So I'm a batting performance specialist, and it's actually I still have to check myself when I say this, but over the last 25 years, I've discovered that, there's two things that essentially cause ceilings in player performance. The first one is the habits that you formed in how you think. And everybody discounts the impact that thoughts and emotions have on the decisions that you make out in the middle. So that's the first thing that I help players with. And then the second thing is, having worked with players for extensively, from kids, having spent tens of thousands of hours in the nets, all the way up to guys now play at the highest level, starting to identify, okay, they're key things that the very best in the world do and have all done. And when I say very best, just looking at sort of blanketly every player who's averaged over 50. And I've identified some key fundamentals, which are then the building blocks of, I hate the word technical, because my message is that, focusing all your time and energy on technique is the biggest mistake you're making. It's the reason you're stuck, frustrated, and you're not improving your performance. And your fundamentals inform your technique. So once you understand what these key fundamentals are, how to train them, and then most importantly, how to measure them so you know if you're doing them correctly, your measurables act as a feedback loop that prevent any bad habits from creeping into your game. So my process is called simple batting. There are 3 steps to it. And it's all about creating self-awareness around thoughts, emotions, and distractions, developing measurables in games to check where your energy and focus is, and ultimately also in training, creating measurables to protect bad habits from creeping into your fundamentals, so that essentially you're not on this roller coaster that almost every batsman that I speak to is on, where you're always reacting to your dismissals and you're reacting to low scores. So you're always looking at fixed aspects of your technique, trying to find form and chase scores, rather putting you 100% in control of where your energy and focus is going, so that you're not on these ups and downs, but by developing consistent and repeatable processes in how you think and how you train and play, well, the byproduct of that consistency is improved consistency in your performance.
You mentioned it there. You mentioned in our previous video as well, technique-based training engages the conscious mind and can actually, as you said there, have a detrimental impact on the batter. Just a layman's question, just me, a club cricketer. If I went to you and said, I'm struggling with my forward defense, can't punch off the back foot, there must be something wrong with my technique. Coach, help me. What would you say back to me as just a clubbie that doesn't know much and hasn't gone nowhere near the highest level?
Geez, well, if the first thing, the simplest thing is, okay, number 1, see the ball. And then number 2, move from a stable position into a stable position. If you do those 2 things, you're immediately going to experience an improvement in the quality of your positions, stable to stable. And the number 1 principle of batting is you need to see the ball. The challenge is, okay, what are the thoughts and emotions and distractions taking your focus away from allowing yourself to see the ball? And that's where you've got to develop skills and processes. But if you can just go in off 4-1, everybody gets overwhelmed, especially pre-season. What are my feet doing? Where's my bat coming from? Well, these are all thoughts that are taking your focus away from seeing the ball. So if you just go in there with the basic concept of, okay, I've got to see the ball and I want to move from a stable position into a stable position. And then if you're doing those things well, then the next thing, just create awareness around your contact points. How close is the ball bouncing into the ground? That'll be on your straight bat shots and cross bat shots. Am I swinging top to bottom? But those would be the most simplistic things that you could focus on that will have an instant impact on your balance and the consistency with which you're making contact with the ball. You know, drill work has got a huge place in skills development, but I think drill work has also become far too gimmicky, far too complicated, where we're overloading players with things to think about. So not just on trying to achieve unrealistic outcomes that you will never see happen in a game. We're trying to replicate something that happens in a game by creating an environment like, you know, bouncing balls off tables and all sorts of strange things, you know, putting pads on bats to, you know, for strength training and things like that. Too many distractions, and then obviously too much coaching information. There's so many moving parts in a sequence, and for the most part, I think coaches are seeing a symptom and they're not addressing the root cause. And when they're seeing a symptom, they're asking a player to think of a moving part in that sequence, where the more powerful way to do it would be, what is the end outcome that you want? Send the message, now get out the way. I hope that makes sense, in that we don't want to be standing there thinking about, okay, I've got to keep my elbow up, and then I want to strike my heel, and then I've got to turn my shoulder, and then I want to make sure that the bat's on weight and the toe. Information overload, one thing at a time, and try to make the outcome measurable so that it's play, measure, reflect, reaffirm the message, and then carry on. I hope that kind of simplifies it, in that we want our mind to be clear when we're playing. So even if we're doing drill work and we're working on improving a specific skill, clear mind, play, execute, measure, and then reflect. If we need to reaffirm the message, clear the mind, and rinse and repeat.
You talk about the act of having a fearless mind when you go out to bat. Do you think that the psychological aspect of batting is really untapped in the modern game, or even in history? Even though, like, people do ban out the phrase that batting's mainly been played between the ears.
So Paddy Upton recently shared, he's got a podcast, and he did a fantastic, so I would encourage everybody who's listening, go check out Paddy's podcast. There's an interview with Shane Watson. And Shane figured out a few of these things in his career and he said, well, why is nobody asking the question, what were you thinking about before you got out? And the really interesting thing is that even though Shane knew this as a player, he said, I'm kicking myself because I interviewed Ricky Ponting. I didn't want to ask him about his mental processes. All we did with the entire podcast was speak about our technique. So that's how ingrained it is as a habit, and how neglected that even somebody who achieved phenomenal outcomes, especially at the back end of his career with his consistency in T20 cricket, even he forgot to ask those questions when he was interviewing somebody. And it was the thing that he attributed to working with a coach, I think it was out of the US, who works with F1 drivers, who helped him overcome his fear of the short ball, helped him develop processes to overcome that. Yet, even just out of the habit of continually having discussions around technique with players, that's what you get sucked into. And I think that's the biggest challenge for cricket at the moment. And any player who certainly wants to gain an edge will be looking into, okay, how can I enhance my thought processes? How can I develop consistent processes there? How can I develop tools to become self-aware? What types of thoughts and emotions are actually causing my dismissals? Because the reason everybody focuses all their time on technique is because dismissals manifest as technical errors. So it's got to be technique. But, you know, as Shane said in the podcast with Paddy, no one's asking, what were you thinking before that? And then the other added layer of complexity to that, which was great, again, coming from a player who's had as much success as him, I would never share that with my team coach because I don't want him to know that I'm struggling mentally or I'm fearful of the short ball, because he's going to hang on, so if he's not a good space, I'm not picking him. The only other thing I found really interesting in the interview was that Shane was one of the first people. He took his own physiotherapist on tour with him because this guy had helped him overcome injuries that were plaguing him his entire career. So he took his own specialist on tour with him. But when it comes to, he worked with an external specialist to help himself, but then his conclusion was players must ask themselves those questions and not share it with the head, and they won't share it with the head coach. Well, why not just get your own external expert who can help you with that? It's private and confidential, and he's got no say in team selection. His only goal is to help you overcome your challenges so that you can become a more consistent performer.
If a youngster then just came to you and he said, look, I'm struggling to open up, do you have these unconscious thoughts before I'm going out to bat, just before I play a shot, having these thoughts? Is there any tips, processes that you could perhaps give them to assist them?
Yeah, so again, so this is actually crazy, how big an issue fear of failure is. So I've got an amateur program that we run, and we've got a group of about 4,000 Facebook members now. And I had an appointment setter who was of Bulgarian descent in the Netherlands, knows nothing about cricket. And he eventually commented and said, why are all of these people, every time you ask them, what's your biggest challenge? Fear of failure, fear of losing my wicket. He said, every single player. Now, if that is the most common thing that's coming up, is that fear, okay, now to answer your question, where's it coming from? So the first thing is unrealistic expectations. You speak to guys, and most guys think, okay, cool, well, my benchmark of success is 50 every innings. And if I don't achieve that, I am failing. Now, the reality is that a player as good as Matthew Hayden, if you take his career statistics, batting average of 44 in ODI cricket and north of 50 in Test cricket, he failed 70% of the time. If 50 was a benchmark as a successful innings. So if somebody who's a legend of the game, using the benchmark that most batsmen are using to measure themselves on, as being a successful innings, failed 70% of the time, what are you doing to yourself? So that would be the first thing. Like, once players can actually realize that, it helps them become more relaxed. And then, it's quite a detailed process. Or you've got to then develop processes. Okay, well, how can I detach from the outcome? So yeah, I know that's unrealistic, but well, what happens if I've had 7 low scores in a row? How do I manage that failure, or is it really failure? And I think that is the biggest issue that most players have. Learning how to manage, and well, number one, detach from the outcome so that scores don't impact confidence, and developing the right types of processes to be able to achieve that outcome.
You also talk about having clarity and purpose. Does that link back into kind of negating distractions, having a game plan, etc., or is there more to it than that?
Yes. So on that, well, you want to know where your energy and focus needs to go, which is something that I touched on earlier. So the reason everybody else is always on this roller coaster, because they're always reacting, and they're always reacting to things outside of their control. So it's about defining, okay, what is within my control? What are the main things that are outside of my control that might take my focus away from me allowing myself to see and react to the ball? And then, again, developing processes that once I can identify these distractions, I can identify these thoughts, and then on a deeper level, what sort of emotions are those thoughts triggering within me, and how are they impacting the decisions that I'm making out in the middle? How do I manage those things? How do I manage them so that I can, within the best of my ability? Because I think this is the other thing. People think that the best players don't get nervous. Everybody gets nervous. Everybody has self-doubt when scores aren't coming. And again, it comes back to, do you have consistent and repeatable processes that you can trust, that if you consistently channel your energy and focus into those things as regularly as you can, and we're all going to get distracted at times, but it's about shortening that loop and continually rechanneling, that then delivers, well, one, more peace of mind, because I know where my energy and focus is going. And if I just keep maintaining these things, well, these outcomes are going to take care of themselves because of the consistency that I'm channeling my energy and focus into these areas of my game. How am I training my fundamentals? How am I preparing? And what are my match processes? And by developing that, that then gives you more peace of mind and allows you to then actually detach from your outcomes. Be like, hey, I'm process driven here. If I do these things consistently, I don't have to worry about anything else. The minute I take my eyes off these things and I start chasing and reacting, well, I'm no longer in control. And if I'm not in control anymore, how can I expect consistent outcomes?
When you sit on as a coach, having worked with elite players in the game, when you sit on players, batters, analysing opposition bowlers, do you see that as part of the process? Do you see it as a distraction? You see all the teams, international teams, county teams, franchise teams, got loads of analysts, etc. Whenever a player gets out, they're straight on the laptop looking at what shot they played to get out to that thing. Where do you sit on that as a coach? Do you advocate it, or is it down to the individual, or is it a distraction?
That question that you're asking comes back to, there's a fantastic book called Winning Ugly by Brad Gilbert. He was like a top 10 money earner on the ATP tour, but like no one, hardly anybody ever knew of him. His process was to understand what is my opposition's go-to shot when he's under pressure. And if I can take that away from him, well, it's going to ramp the pressure up on him even more. So I can understand from a bowler's perspective, wanting to know that. For a batter, you can only see and react to what is coming to you. And if you're trying to second guess, oh, well, the statistics say that in this sort of circumstance, the likelihood of him bowling me a slower ball is X. Well, if you're looking for that slower ball, which is premeditation, and that slower ball doesn't come, the likelihood of you being able to execute is very, very slim. So certainly I see the value from a bowler's perspective. Okay, what sort of shot might he go for in a pressure situation? But again, stick to your strengths. Don't try and bowl something that's not your strength, where, if you're appalling at executing Yorkers, or if you don't have a great slow ball, why on earth would you try and bowl one to somebody who doesn't hit them well, but definitely will punish a bad one? And the likelihood of you executing a good one is slim. So that's from the bowling side, but certainly from a batter's point of view, see and react. And then it's about assessing what is a good ball and what is a bad ball in the current conditions. What impact are the conditions having on a good ball being, what is a good ball, what is a bad ball in these conditions? And then the most important thing then is what element of risk is acceptable, and that'll be determined by the situation of the game, and a large extent, obviously, on what format you play. But ultimately, that's it. A good ball is a good ball, a bad ball is a bad ball. That only changes according to conditions and situation and format.
You also talk about, when it comes to training, you like to ensure that each batter that you work with has full 360 access to the field. Again, a layman question for myself, what does that actually mean? What kind of things are you doing in training that ensures your players have that?
Well, the first thing that's going to affect your access to the field is how you swing the bat. So every player who's averaged over 50 in the modern era in Test cricket unweights the bat. It's certainly not a concept that I discovered. You get Greg Chappell's book. It's Coaching Matters. I think I'm pulling a blank there for a second. Trying to see what's behind me here. There it is. Greg Chappell on coaching. So he spoke about it, where, you know, it's more than just getting the toe of the bat vertical. It's making the bat weightless, but at the same time, you're unweighting your body to get ready to move. Now, if you don't do that, it's going to limit your access to the field. And that's a fundamental principle that alarmingly has not been identified as a fundamental of swinging a cricket bat. So when you go down and you do your level 1, your level 2, or whatever, for the most part, I've even heard people say they've gone and done their ECB level 4 and had 2 days of batting workshop where not once was the bat swing ever discussed. Now, the bat swing is the mechanism which is playing a huge part in the quality and the access, quality of the contact and the access that you've got to the ball. Obviously, then your body positions are also going to impact that, but that is the building block. So how you swing the bat, it is an effective swing. And when I say it's a fundamental, I'm not saying every single player swings the bat the same way, but they all get it in a very, very similar position prior to commencing the downswing, which is with the toe, either vertical, some go past the vertical, some are just short of it. But when the bat is in that position, it is weightless. And it allows you then to access the ball and swing down on the ball.
What are the key fundamentals are there? You mentioned fundamentals. You mentioned that any of us, you can go a bit deeper on as well to perhaps can assist a youngster who's probably struggling with their game who's watching this.
So how you swing the bat, of course, number one. You know, if you're not swinging the bat effectively, you're not going to make effective contact with the ball. How you swing it, obviously, your grip plays a big part in that. In what is the bat doing and how are you getting the bat to consistently square up at contact to the ball, whether that's cross bat or straight bat. So that's what you've got to develop on your bat flow. Once you've got an effective bat flow, and the best way to train that is by training a full swing of the bat. And when I say a full swing, the most natural swing, you give a bat to any kid, and you show him how to hold it properly, and you ask him, he tries to hit over cow corner. That is the natural, most effective swing. Once you've grooved that swing, you can now check the shot. So instead of playing a full shot all the way over the shoulder, you can check it, or you can stop it halfway and you can defend. And then your only other option is, are you leaving? So the best way to encourage that is a full swing over cow corner. And what you as a coach are looking for is that the toe of the bat getting vertical to the sky prior to the commencement of the downswing. Not standing with it up straight up in the sky before the balls ever come. There needs to be a fluency and a flow to it. And you'll see that the players who've got the highest batting averages just happen to have the biggest arc, which everybody says don't swing from gully. Or all the guys with the highest batting averages in the world, their bat comes round from gully and then it comes and it drops into the slot. And they're the guys who score with the most freedom against all types of bowlers and all types of playing surfaces and all types of conditions. So that's the first thing, effective bat swing. Other things, obviously head positions and body angles, which we touched on briefly, just make sure stable to stable. Strong head positions and the lasting point of contact. Check these 3 things consistently, develop processes to train and measure them, and batting becomes incredibly simple.
Gio, it's been a fascinating chat. You do have a great system. We'll put all the links in the description of this video. So whoever is watching this, please do check it out. But just to end this chat off, if you were to give one nugget of advice to a young player, what would it be? Your number 1 tip?
Geez, the thing that can make the biggest impact, what I started with, see the ball, stable to stable.
Perfect.
That's the
Gio,
biggest impact for any young player.
Yeah, perfect. Gio, appreciate your time as always. Thank you for this chat. It's been fascinating and all the best for the weeks ahead. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks again for the opportunity to have a chat, Neel.
So Neel Khagram, Cricket Love Stories, Gio Colussi. Thank you.